It's Grudge Match Day! And if you're into tone chasing, this video is 100% for you. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Jam Shed, and welcome to this episode of Grudge Match. For those of you that are new here and you're asking yourself, what is a grudge match? Simply put, it's tone chasing. It's being curious, exploring, and having a whole heck of a lot of fun doing it. So if that's you, stick around. The ride is going to be fun today because this episode was brought to me by you, and it was a suggestion from a viewer that is to a specific topic, and it's revisiting the Vintage 30 and the Karnivore. And as you all know, the Karnivore has become one of my favorite speakers. It's what I've been featuring here a lot on the channel. I am not sponsored by Eminence by any stretch, or supported by Christian Cola from Cola Audio Cult, who it is his signature speaker. I want to be clear on that. I just love the speaker. It's fantastic. So this video today is asking or answering a question of, can you take a Vintage 30 and make it sound like a Karnivore? Now, a bunch of you are probably going, oh, come on, here we go. But that's the fun part about this channel, is it's just exploration and passive content for you all to enjoy. And honestly, I had a whole heck of a lot of fun exploring how I could pull this off. And what I mean by that, just the act of getting this out to you was incredibly fun, and just making sure that it was going to flow well. And now that I've talked enough about it, let's talk about how we're going to do this and exactly what we're going to be looking at. So let's take a look at what's on the bench for the rig today. And here it is. We have the Boss GE-7. So the viewer had suggested that from their understanding, that you could take a Boss GE-7 and you could use it to tune your Vintage 30 to sound just like, or similar to, not just like, but similar to a Karnivore. And so that's what we're going to explore today. Can we do that? And I think the answer is, I don't know, but I do know what I experienced, and your mileage may vary. And I want to lead with that. I want to be very clear here that one of the biggest takeaways right out of the gate is that this is super specific to your own setup. And I want to unpack that for just a moment here, because you have a couple of factors that every person, every time you do something like this, will inherently be different and require different tuning. So unless you have a way to lock your system in the same environment, the same mic positioning, all of that has to be exactly the same, and it has to be tuned to your specific rig. So here is exactly how I did this test initially when I was trying to figure out how I was going to do this, and here's what I've learned. One, it's important that you have a Karnivore in your arsenal to begin with, because you have to have a way to tune your Vintage 30 using the GE-7 to that Karnivore. That has to happen. And then secondarily, you're going to be using the same rig. So what I do here is not going to be the same as what you experience, because getting the mic position locked in is critical to this. Unless you're using, and I'm not, an IR, that would give you more consistency, but the process would still need to be the same. You got to get your hands on a Karnivore, then tune your setup to that, and off you go. Now, honestly, the simplest thing, if you're going to go the IR way, then you should probably just get the IR pack of the Karnivore and off you go. But for fun's sake, for those of you that have a GE-7 and a Vintage 30 and say, I might want to try that, and maybe you get your hands on one, maybe you get the IR and you tune your setup. Anyway, that's a lot of chatter, and I just had that whole circular thought happen in that instant, because that's exactly what happens here. One camera shot and a whole stream of consciousness you get from me as we go down this rabbit hole. Back to the pedal board though. So, and to my explanation about what I understood about this, is that my rig is my rig here, and your mileage will vary when you try this. But I think the pathway to doing this well, if you were to try to do this, would be to get your hands on a Karnivore, load it into a cabinet, tune your Vintage 30 to it, get your GE-7, settings to where you think it's close enough, and you then have it, right? Now you're all set. And that's the pathway that I took to get this done. But I want to be clear, anytime you touch the microphone, it changes the dynamic, especially if you move the Karnivore microphone, because now you have a different dynamic, because microphone positioning does matter in this particular instance, because you're trying to recreate a specific tone. It's fun. Now, I'm not going to do all of the microphone placements. I've done all of that. I even have a general idea on the GE-7 of where I need to be in this ballpark. And so that's what we're going to explore. So let's break it down. So here's what we're going to do for the test today. I'm going to play the Vintage 30, and then I'll play the Karnivore. And we'll hear them a couple of times. No, we'll hear them once. We'll just go back to back. I will chapter this so you can hear what they sound like independently. And then I will move to then A-B'ing them back and forth until I can tune. So we'll call that the tuning section. So the first thing will be just a standard A-B. The second thing will be the tuning section. And then I'll come back and give my thoughts once I get it close or close-ish, or maybe I won't. Your opinion matters here to me in the sense that I'm just fascinated by what your thinking is. I mean, I honestly, poking holes in this test, this isn't a test. This is exploration. Big difference. Testing means you're going to be able to replicate this. And I've already said, from Jump Street, there is no replication here because you really have to have it in your environment. So back to the steps that we're going to take. So step one will be just a simple A-B between the two. I'm not going to give any thoughts. It's just going to be chattered, so you have that as the baseline. And then from the baseline, we will move to the tuning section where I will go back and forth on the Karnivore. On deck here, if you see, I've got an A-B switch. That's the microphones. Those are, B is the Vintage 30 and A is the Karnivore. And so when I'm A-Bing, I have to do this interesting click of the EQ and going back and forth, making sure I'm switching it off and on. And I might mess that up here and there, but you guys will get to hear it and it'll become consistent. And then I'll come back and give my thoughts. And then the last thing I'll do is I'll throw it in a mix and we'll see what it sounds like there. And then we'll give final thoughts and we'll land the plane. All right, we are 6 minutes in. Let me go grab a guitar and get to the business of figuring out, can we do this? Can we take a Vintage 30 and our setup here today and make it sound similar to this beloved Karnivore that I have? Let's give it a shot. I'll be right back. The axe of choice for our testing purposes today is my 2016 Evo. It has a Gibson Burstbucker 3 in the bridge position, and that's exactly where we'll stay for this test. Let's jump right into the rig and what we're going to be using. So here you see we have the Boss GE-7 on deck alongside of the DoD Overdrive Preamp 250 pedal. Those will both be running to the front of this 2-channel triple rectifier, which will be then headed to the Karnivore and the Vintage 30, and they will be captured by the SM57. Again, a quick outline of how we're going to do this is I will let you hear them independently. Also, I will be chaptering this, so we'll hear the two speakers independently, so we have that baseline. I'll come back, give my thoughts. We'll move to the tuning section of this shootout today, and then we'll have this then all play through a nice little, open jam session. Not open jam session, that's not the real world. It'll just be like in the mix between the two to see how they sound, and I'll come back and give my thoughts on that, and we'll land the plane. All right, let's get to the A-B baseline right now. Here we go. Well, there you have it. That's the baseline. Quite simple. Both sound phenomenal. I love both of these speakers. I just think they sound great. And honestly, the pairing of the two of them together, when you have them in a mix, they sound super cool. It's really rich, great tone. Okay, now we're going to move on to the tuning section. But before we do that, I just want to highlight how that's going to happen. I'm starting with the GE-7 at just everything right down the center, and then I'll start tweaking and I'll go back and forth. So just keep your eye on that. I'll try to have some sort of indicator on here if I can and see if I can make that work. It is a little bit of pedal hoop jumping and button pushing, so forgive me if I make a misstep, but you'll get a good idea of how it sounds. And then once I have them where I think they're as close as I'm going to get it, we'll throw this in again, as I said, a little in the mix jam, and I'll land the plane on this. All right, here we go with the tuning phase. Let's get it started. Okay, that was a lot of fun and a lot of tweaking and very interesting, at least from my perspective. And I just want to say right out the top, one of the things that's interesting about the Karnivore is it has this unique mid-range, and the best way I can explain that mid-range, what I'm hearing there, is it sounds almost like it's slightly veiled, like someone put a bit of a blanket in front of it, where it's covering a lot of that top end, sometimes less fizzy, I guess is the best way to say it. When you think about how the Vintage 30 sounds, you can still hear that fuzzy, fizzy, mid-rangey aggressiveness that it has, and I feel like the Karnivore does a nice job mellowing that out a bit. Almost sounds like you're putting like a couple of sheets over top of the cab and hearing it from a distance. And the other thing that I noticed between the Vintage 30 versus the Karnivore is the Karnivore does have a very unique top end sizzle that is always apparent, and it's different than the Vintage 30. And again, these words and adjectives are hard, but I feel like it's the whoosh and whistle sound, or that whistle, like you're kind of whistling without actually making the whistle sound, like it has like that sound to it, the whoosh type sound in the upper register. And the Vintage 30 has always been known for that, but it's very interesting how the Karnivore in the same range is a little more sharp and has a little more clarity there, is the best way I could describe that. And that's a hard thing to replicate. And as I was tuning this, what I keep noticing with this GE-7 is there are times where I feel like you move something up and then you go to move something else where you think, oh, that's the natural thing to do. And it doesn't do anything. So it's interesting to work with this EQ because it becomes very dynamic. And I know that's a result of how this pedal is designed because of the overlap of the frequencies and how they work. So when you're pulling something down, you might not get much of an adjustment out of what's next to it because of the range that you inadvertently put yourself in that you're working with. It's all fascinating. I'm sure there's a bunch of science behind it, but those are the best words that I can use for it. So now I think the next best thing for me to do is to give you another baseline so that with this being chaptered, you'll be able to hear it against what it originally sounded like versus what it sounds like now. And I'm talking specifically about the Vintage 30 versus the Karnivore, but I'll play them both back to back. So I'll play the Vintage 30 first with the pedal engaged, which it is right now, and then I'll click it off and I'll play the Karnivore. So then we have that quick comparison, and then I'll come back and give my final thoughts on that, and then we'll do the jam, and then we'll land the plane with the resolve of all of this madness that we're doing today. Here we go. So we got to hear the Vintage 30 with the EQ pedal engaged, at least as close as I could get it. Now, again, your mileage may vary. This is just fun experimenting and testing, and I get to do this in real time. And of course, we could do this for hours. You could be here forever tweaking. I mean, it's just an endless amount of things, but I think I got it as close as I could get it. And so feel free to A-B those in the chapters. As I was playing, I actually had this thought. So we're going to hear this thing in a jam in just a second, and we'll hear it on these settings, but I'm wondering if it makes sense to, actually, you know what? I think that's actually the best course of action. We'll hear this in the jam. Let's take a listen. Here it is right now. so very fascinating. This was a cool experiment. So my final thoughts on this is, can you make a Vintage 30 sound like a Karnivore? No, I don't believe so. I think you can get it very close. I think you can get in the ballpark. And when you hear these two in the mix, and especially with the blend, I mean, it's very fascinating to hear the two. And of course, I thought they sound great with the blend. Independently, they sound good. You certainly can hear the difference when you're listening to the isolated guitar tracks versus the in the mix guitar tracks. And so, what a fun experiment. I think overall, if you were trying to do this without having a Karnivore, that would be incredibly difficult, a really hard task to do, because unless you have the ability to take your setup and tune it in that moment. And then secondarily, like my cabs that I use for this are just single 1x12s that I actually built. So they're very similar, almost borderline identical. And the mic booms that I use are actually mounted to the guitar cab, so I can pretty much lock them into place, but I can't lock in the microphone itself. Now, I'm sure you could find a microphone, mount that you could do that, but you would literally have to do that in order to make sure that every time you were to take this thing out, that it would be replicating the sound. Otherwise, the second you move that microphone just a little bit, you've lost the tone that you were cloning from the Karnivore. So again, it's fun. I don't know that you're going to be too far away. In fact, I would say that if you have a Vintage 30, you're probably not too far away from a Karnivore. And while they are inherently different, you're still getting that general DNA. So when it comes to a mix, I think they both sound fantastic. Again, once you start putting instruments in, things get buried a little bit, frequencies change and all the rest of it. Well, they don't change, they stay the same, but there's other frequencies that are playing alongside of it. So it's all very fascinating. And I love that this was a viewer suggested, video to do. I think just, again, it being curious and exploring. I would have never done this if it wasn't for you guys. I wouldn't have thought to try to make my Vintage 30 sound like a Karnivore using a pedal, but this is what we do. And it goes back to what I said way at the beginning of this channel, which is not just be curious, but use what you have. And if you love the sounds that you're getting, be curious and explore. And if anything, I have figured out that now I know how to use this pedal a little differently, to explore different tones and really just listen with my ears. While I'm trying to make this sound like a Karnivore, inadvertently, it's still a Vintage 30. So it sounds like a Vintage 30 that has some EQing on it. And I'm being completely honest there, and that truly is the case. That's what we're doing here, but it's that exploration. And I think I like what I got out of this. And since I have the pictures now of what this looks like, but the second I move that speaker, I'm going to lose this tone. So we'll keep exploring and keep having fun. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and subscribe. We are just 2 subscribers away from 100. What a awesome milestone for the channel. I can't wait to celebrate with you when we hit 1,000. Maybe that'll happen by next week. You guys are gonna have to like, share, and subscribe like crazy for me to be able to hit 1,000 subscribers. But hey, listen, that's not what the journey's all about. It's all about having some fun, exploring what's going on up in this brain here. Again, I hope you've enjoyed your time here. I appreciate every single one of you, and I wish you all well. And I will see you on the next one. Take care, everybody.